I found my fiancé Thomas cheating with my maid of honor Rachel the night before our $75,000 wedding at the plaza. I stood frozen in the doorway of the hotel suite, watching them tangled in sheets I had paid for. Instead of screaming, I quietly closed the door, dried my tears, and made a decision that would change everything. By morning, I had transformed my wedding into a charity gala that raised $250,000 for foster kids. 3 months later, Thomas called me crying from his car. I sent him to voicemail. I was too busy running my new PR firm to care. It was supposed to be the happiest weekend of my life. 3 years of planning, $75,000 invested, and every detail. Meticulously arranged for the perfect June wedding at the plaza in Manhattan. The vintage Marchesa dress I'd been eyeing for years, the 7-tier cake from Magnolia Bakery, the string quartet that cost more than my first car, all of it ready for tomorrow. I should have been sipping champagne with my bridesmaids, getting a mani-pedi, or having my final dress fitting. Instead, I was standing in the doorway of our hotel suite, staring at my fiancé and my maid of honor tangled in our wedding night sheets. Thomas didn't even notice me at first. Rachel did. Her eyes met mine over his shoulder, widening in shock before narrowing with something that looked disturbingly like triumph. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just quietly closed the door, walked to the elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. My hands didn't even shake. It was like I was watching myself from somewhere far away, somewhere safe from the nuclear explosion happening in my chest. In the lobby bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. What now? I whispered to myself. In my purse, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Probably Thomas realizing I'd seen them. Probably Rachel with excuses. Probably my mother wondering where I was for the rehearsal dinner in 2 hours. I silenced it and slipped it back into my bag. Updated. Just a quick note, yes, I really did walk in on them in our wedding suite. Thomas had actually checked in early, claiming he wanted to set up a romantic surprise for after the rehearsal. Dinner. Turns out the surprise was definitely not for me. Has anyone else discovered their partner cheating in the absolute worst timing possible? My relationship with Thomas had started like something out of a rom-com. We met at a charity auction, where we both bid on the same vintage record player. He was charming, successful, and looked at me like I was the center of his universe. After dating for a year, he proposed on a private yacht cruise around Manhattan with a ring that made my coworkers gasp. I said yes without hesitation. Thomas was everything I'd ever wanted. Stable, ambitious, and seemingly devoted. Rachel had been my best friend since college. We were roommates freshman year at NYU and stayed close even after graduation when she pursued fashion design, and I went into public relations. When Thomas proposed, Rachel was the first person I called. She cried with me over FaceTime, promised to help with everything, and accepted my request to be my maid of honor with a dramatic squeal that made me laugh until my sides hurt. The planning process had been exhausting but exciting. I balanced my job at a mid-sized PR firm while coordinating with vendors, selecting flowers, and handling the million tiny details that go into creating a dream wedding. Thomas was supportive but mostly hands-off. "Whatever makes you happy, babe," he'd say with a kiss on my forehead when I asked for his opinion. I thought it was sweet that he wanted me to have exactly what I wanted. Now I realized he just didn't care enough to be invested. There had been signs, of course. The late nights at work that became more frequent. The weekends when Rachel was mysteriously unavailable. The way they'd sometimes exchange glances at group dinners that lasted a beat too long. But I dismissed it all as wedding stress-making. Me paranoid. After all, Thomas was my forever person, and Rachel was the sister I never had. They wouldn't do that to me. Except they did. Standing in that bathroom, I made a decision. I wouldn't cancel anything. I wouldn't hide away in shame while everyone whispered about poor, abandoned me. No. I would use every skill I developed in my PR career and turn this disaster into something else entirely. I pulled out my phone and called my boss, Melissa. "I need a favor," I said when she answered. "Actually, I need several favors, and I need them now." The next 12 hours were a blur of phone calls, emails, and last-minute arrangements. I called the wedding planner, the venue coordinator, the caterer, the florist, everyone involved in creating my perfect day. I explained what happened in the briefest possible terms and then laid out my new plan. We were transforming my wedding into a charity gala benefiting foster children's education. Most vendors were surprisingly supportive. Some even reduced their fees when they heard what had happened and what I was trying to do. The wedding planner, Jenna, went into overdrive, helping me rework the seating arrangements, revising the schedule, and contacting guests with a change of plans. My coworkers at the PR firm activated their contact networks, reaching out to local celebrities, influencers, and the press to drum up last-minute support and coverage. By midnight, I was still making calls, my voice growing hoarse as I explained the situation over and over. At 2 a.m., I finally crawled into the hotel bed, a different room, obviously, for a few hours of fitful sleep. At 5 a.m., my alarm went off and I was back at it, finalizing details and preparing to face the day that should have been my wedding. But was now something entirely different. I hadn't responded to any of Thomas's frantic calls or Rachel's tearful voicemails. I hadn't told my parents exactly what happened, just that the wedding was off but the event was still on, transformed into a charity gala. My mom had been confused but supportive. My dad had been silently furious, correctly guessing what must have happened. They promised to be there, both to support me and to help manage the inevitable questions and gossip. At noon, 6 hours before the event was scheduled to begin, I sat in the hotel salon getting my hair and makeup done, not as a bride, but as the host of a high-profile charity event. The stylist worked quietly, occasionally squeezing my shoulder in silent support. I kept my composure, focusing on the details still left to arrange, rather than on the crushing pain threatening to overwhelm me if I let my guard down for even a moment. That's when my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. It was Jessica Torres, the features editor at New York Magazine. One of my coworkers had reached out to her about covering the event. I have to say, this is the most interesting pitch I've received. In months, she said after introducing herself. A jilted bride turning her wedding into a charity gala overnight? That's a story our readers would love. Can we send a photographer and a reporter to cover it? I took a deep breath. This was exactly what I needed. Press coverage would legitimize the event, attract more donors, and maybe, just maybe, help me salvage some dignity from this nightmare. Absolutely, I said, my PR instincts kicking in. But I want the focus to be on the charity, not just the dramatic backstory. These kids deserve more than to be a footnote in my personal drama. Jessica promised to keep the focus balanced, and I gave her the details she needed. By the time I hung up, 3 more media outlets had emailed requesting access. The stylist finished my hair, an elegant updo rather than the romantic, flowing style I'd originally planned, and I stood to examine myself in the mirror. I looked different, determined, maybe even a little fierce. I was wearing a sleek black evening gown instead of my wedding dress, which remained in its garment bag, untouched. The woman in the mirror wasn't a heartbroken victim. She was someone taking control of an impossible situation. For the first time since finding Thomas and Rachel together, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. Something that felt dangerously close to pride. At 3 p.m., I arrived at the plaza to oversee the final preparations. The wedding arch had been repurposed as a photo backdrop featuring the charity's logo, hastily designed by one of my designer friends overnight. The wedding favors, custom champagne flutes with our names and wedding date, had been packed away, replaced by information cards about the charity and how to donate. The seating chart had been redone, moving family members who might cause scenes as far away from each other as possible. "You are the most badass woman I have ever met," Jenna, the wedding planner, said as we surveyed the transformed ballroom. "I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone handle a disaster with this much grace, or turn it into something so positive." I gave her a small smile. "Ask me again tomorrow if I'm handling it with grace. Right now, I'm running on adrenaline and spite." At 5:30 p.m., half an hour before the event was set to begin, my phone lit up with a text from Rachel. "I'm so sorry. We never meant to hurt you. Can we please talk?" I deleted it without responding and turned my attention to greeting the first arrivals, representatives from the foster care charity, who still seemed a bit shell-shocked by the sudden windfall, coming their way. By 6 p.m., the ballroom was filling with a strange mix of my wedding guests, many looking confused but supportive. Charity representatives, local celebrities who'd answered my team's last-minute calls, and members of the press. I stood at the entrance, greeting everyone with a composed smile that felt plastered to my face. My parents flanked me like bodyguards, my mother holding my hand so tightly it almost hurt. My father scanning the crowd with narrowed eyes, presumably looking for Thomas. "He wouldn't dare show his face," my dad muttered. "Actually, I hope he does," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. It would make for a better story in the press, and that means more attention for the charity. My dad looked at me with a mixture of pride and concern. "When did my little girl become so tough?" "About 18 hours ago," I said, and we both attempted something close to a laugh, updated. "So many of you asked how I managed to change the event overnight. I didn't sleep, had amazing colleagues, and leveraged every contact in my PR Rolodex. My boss Melissa actually came through with 3 celebrity appearances. Minor celebrities, but still. And yes, Thomas's family was there. His mother avoided eye contact while his dad actually shook my hand with a look that said, 'I know my son's an idiot.' Have you ever turned a personal disaster into something positive?" At 7 p.m., I took to the small stage that had been set up where Thomas and I were supposed to have our first dance. The room quieted as I tapped the microphone. For a moment, I feared my voice would fail me, that the emotion I'd been suppressing would finally break through and leave me sobbing in front of everyone. But when I spoke, my voice was clear and strong. Thank you all for coming tonight. As you've probably realized, this isn't quite the event you were expecting to attend. A gentle ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Life sometimes throws us unexpected challenges, and we have two choices. We can crumble or we can pivot. Tonight is my pivot. I explained about the charity, about how the money raised tonight would help foster children pursue higher education, about how each donation could change a life. I didn't mention Thomas or Rachel by name. I didn't need to. The gossip had spread quickly, and the sympathetic glances from the crowd told me everyone knew enough. So please enjoy the evening. The open bar is still very much open. Another laugh from the crowd, stronger this time. The food is delicious, the music is great, and your presence here means more than I can express. Now let's raise some money for these kids. The applause was thunderous, and as I stepped down from the stage, people approached me with hugs, words of support, and, most importantly, checks and credit cards ready to donate. The event staff had set up a donation station where my gift table should have been, and it was quickly surrounded by guests eager to contribute. By 8 p.m., the event was in full swing. The strange mix of wedding guests and charity supporters had blended surprisingly well, united by the unusual circumstances and the good cause. The dance floor was filled, the bar was busy, and the donation total kept climbing on the large screen we'd set up to track our progress. That's when I saw them, Thomas and Rachel, standing uncertainly at the entrance to the ballroom. They weren't dressed for a gala. They looked like they'd thrown on whatever was closest, with Thomas in jeans and a button-down and Rachel in a simple dress. They hadn't expected to be seen in public today, I realized. They'd expected me to cancel everything and hide away while they continued their betrayal in private. A hush fell over the section of the room that had noticed them, and heads turned as the silence spread. I felt rather than saw my father start moving toward them, but I placed a hand on his arm to stop him. This was my moment to handle, my closure to seek. I walked toward them, aware of every eye in the room on me, aware of the reporters watching with interest, aware that how I handled this would define the narrative moving forward. As I approached, Thomas took a step forward, his expression a mix of apology and defiance. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice low but clear enough for nearby guests to hear. "We came to apologize," Thomas said, his voice cracking slightly. "This is what you've done with the wedding. It's incredible. But we need to talk privately." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, keeping my composure. "But since you're here, would you like to make a donation? It's for a good cause." Rachel flinched as if I'd slapped her. Thomas's face reddened. "This isn't a joke," he hissed. "You're making a scene." "No," I said, maintaining eye contact with the man I'd almost married. "You made a scene when you slept with my maid of honor the night before our wedding. I'm just making lemonade from the particularly bitter lemons you handed me." A few people nearby who overheard gasped or chuckled nervously. Thomas looked around, becoming aware of the attention they were attracting. Rachel tugged at his arm, clearly wanting to leave, but he shook her off. "Let me explain," he started, but I cut him off. "There's really no need. Your actions were perfectly clear." I gestured to the crowded ballroom behind me. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a charity event to host. Feel free to donate on your way out." I turned and walked away, my heart pounding, but my stride steady. I heard rather than saw security gently but firmly escorting them out, another detail Jenna had thought of when we replanned the event. As I rejoined the party, a spontaneous round of applause broke out. I acknowledged it with a small nod, then turned to the nearest waiter and took a much-needed glass of champagne. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, donations, and unexpected moments of genuine joy. By midnight, when the ETR event officially ended, we had raised over $250,000 for the charity, more than triple what I'd hoped for. The press coverage had been extensive, with photographers capturing everything from the elegant decorations to the emotional moments. I'd given 3 interviews, sticking to my message about turning personal adversity into community benefit. As the last guests departed, I found myself standing alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by the remnants of what should have been my wedding reception. The floral arrangements were wilting slightly, the dance floor was scuffed from hundreds of shoes, and a few abandoned champagne glasses stood on tables around the room. Jenna approached with a soft smile. "You did it," she said. "I've never seen anything like it." "I had help," I replied, suddenly feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. "I couldn't have done it without you. without my team, without everyone who stepped up. True, she acknowledged. But it started with you refusing to be a victim. That was all you. She hesitated, then added, "What will you do now?" I looked around the ballroom one last time. "Sleep for about 24 hours straight," I said with a tired laugh. "And then, I don't know, start over, I guess." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't quite true. I wasn't starting over, I was starting something new. The seeds of an idea had been planted throughout the evening as I witnessed the power of my PR skills in action. Maybe this disaster wasn't just an ending, but a beginning. The morning after the gala, I woke to find my phone flooded with notifications. The event had gone viral, with the New York Post running the headline, "Jilted Bride Turns Wedding into Charity Goldmine." My inbox was filled with messages from guests, colleagues, and strangers who'd seen the coverage. But most surprising were the 3 emails from different PR firms all essentially saying the same thing. "We're impressed with what you pulled off. Let's talk." I spent the next few days fielding phone calls, giving additional interviews, and processing what had happened. The shock and pain were still there, but they were dulled by the overwhelming positive response to the gala and the growing realization that my career had just been catapulted forward in a way I never could have planned. 1 week after what should have been my wedding day, I met with the CEO of Harper Communications, one of New York's top PR firms. She offered me a senior position at nearly double my current salary, citing my grace under pressure and ability to transform a crisis into an opportunity as exactly the qualities they wanted in their team. I accepted the offer, gave notice, at my old firm, where Melissa hugged me and said she was proud but sad to see me go, and threw myself into the new role. The work was challenging and fulfilling, with high-profile clients who specifically requested me based on what they'd seen of my work at the gala. For the first time in years, I was defining myself by my own achievements, rather than as half of Thomas and me. As for Thomas and Rachel, their story played out exactly as you might expect. According to mutual friends, who now awkwardly straddled the divide between us, they tried to make their relationship work, but fell apart within a month. The foundation of betrayal wasn't strong enough to build anything lasting. Both eventually reached out to me, Thomas with increasingly desperate voicemails, Rachel with lengthy email apologies, but I never responded. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding once they've burned. 3 months after the gala, I received a call from Diana Reynolds, the director of the foster care charity we'd supported. The money raised had already funded scholarships for 15 students, with more to come. She wanted to discuss making the gala an annual event, perhaps with my help coordinating it. That conversation sparked the idea that had been forming in my mind for weeks. 2 days later, I submitted my resignation at Harper Communications and began the paperwork to start my own PR firm specializing in charity events and crisis management for women. I called it Phoenix PR for obvious reasons. 6 months after the night that should have destroyed me, I was sitting in my new office overlooking Madison Avenue, reviewing applications for my 3rd employee hire. My phone rang. Thomas, again. His 7th call this month. As I had each time before, I sent it to voicemail without a second thought. Whatever he needed to say, I didn't need to hear it. I had risen from the ashes of his betrayal, stronger and more successful than either of us could have imagined. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you can become the best thing that ever happened, if you refuse to let it define you. Updated. It's been a year since everything happened, and my life is unrecognizable in the best way. Phoenix PR now has 12 employees, and we've raised over $3 million for women's charities. Thomas still calls occasionally, now blocked, but Rachel actually sent a handwritten letter apologizing that seemed genuine. I still haven't replied. What to say? Wedding dress? Donated to a charity that provides gowns to military brides. Would you have responded to either of their attempts to reconnect, or was cutting them off completely the right call?